Hello, it's Daniel again here at Recovery Central, and this is the 24th of May of 2020, and this is actually the second message from Recovery Central. It's not really a series, but these are messages that are intended to increase understanding and dialogue among us, and also to encourage where there might be feelings of helplessness, as if we can't do anything about the drug problems around us. And so these messages are intended to help us understand the opportunities that really are available to us so that we can make a difference here in Washington, Indiana. I want to talk today about sobriety, and I know that we're familiar with that dictionary definition of sober, which is defined as sparing in the use of food or drink, typically alcohol. And other meanings of the word sober include showing no excessive or extreme qualities of fancy, emotion, or prejudice. The word sober can also mean unhurried, calm, or clear-headed. Now, when we read in 1 Peter 5:8, which says, "Be sober, be vigilant, your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour." In that passage, sober means something more like alert or wide awake and with spiritual senses. What then does it mean for us to be sober or wide awake in this present society? In a world where bigger is better, and consumerism pushes acquisition of goods in ever-increasing amounts, does our sobriety know how to navigate these days? I have been speaking of a table with an invitation to God's light, and this being a place for honesty, confidentiality, openness to the truth, even truth that is not pleasant. And here where we distinguish facts which serve the larger population from other information that might be circulated to support a more personal interest. And this is where we do not just say we address the elephant in the room. We do whatever it takes. And as God's light often confronts the powers in this world, it also calls us to fellowship with God. And while this may sound like a recovery meeting, it can go far beyond that for anyone who for any reason is seeking God's light. And there is, in this world, resistance to this light. I often use the term marketing or marketing terms to suggest the serving of personal interest at the expense of others. It's also where people use power to override the facts. This economic principle of scarcity is often what brings powers to administer, control, and monopolize the scarce resources in our society. And this can be seen in contrast to the abundant wealth of God's kingdom, which believers are called to share freely. And this is a discussion that many churches seem to avoid. So as we seek God's light in this, the year 2020, we might gain new appreciation for hindsight, as I'm sure we've already heard by others. And for Recovery Central, 2020 hindsight can mean wisdom pertaining to addiction recovery, which should have been learned in previous decades in our society. In the 1960s, for example, researchers divided a group of smokers who had volunteered for the research into two subgroups. The first group of smokers was given a slideshow with graphic details of the effects of smoking, emphasizing the fact that very few cancers of the lung can be saved even with the best surgery. The second subgroup was given factual information that lung cancer can be caused by a number of things, such as smog and other elements in the air, and that only a minority of smokers get lung cancer. And yet it was this subgroup where people received the neutral information which reported the higher success rate of reduced tobacco use. In the first group, people were thinking, oh, these guys are just trying to scare us, and they shrugged it off as if it wasn't something to be taken seriously, the graphic slides. And studies like this provide enduring wisdom. We learn a lot from this discussion. The distinguished psychiatrist Dr. Albert J. Glass in 1964 stated that when you accent danger in which there is no chance of survival, people will not be concerned. And if I understand this correctly, warnings must be communicated in such a manner as to maximize the people's confidence to receive the warning and follow a given pathway to safety. We really should have learned a lot from the 1960s research with smokers. And the wisdom should have been put into practice long before now. And we still need to realize how this shock effect does not exactly work as we typically expect. And today, this is hindsight. In fact, we still have the opportunity to communicate lessons learned from previous years. This is one way we can look at this table, I suggest, where there is real potential to have responsible dialogue and make a difference today and to continue in future generations to solve this problem with substance use. We do have options. We can be free from past mistakes, past ways that we have tried to change people's behavior. And when I think of hindsight, I also think of a book written by the late Neil Postman. And this is the book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, written in the mid-1980s. Postman began with a look at the prophecies of George Orwell and Aldous Huxley. And he compared the implications of Orwell's famous book, 1984, written in the late 1940s, with Huxley's book, Brave New World. And Postman begins his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, with a brief review of these two novels. And I find myself wondering why we seem to have very little of this kind of dialogue anymore. In the foreword of Amusing Ourselves to Death, Postman explains that while Orwell wrote in the fear that what we hate will ruin us, Huxley warned that what we love will ruin us. And Huxley prophesied that people will come to love their oppression and adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. And from there, Neil Postman goes on to explain the significant loss of objectivity in the minds of people who are no longer informed by the printed word as much as by the media that informs us with ever-increasing technology. And Postman wrote in 1985, we don't have to think as hard when a soundbite does the thinking for us. And if Postman is correct, we might even see a day when people's entire understanding of a crisis is limited to the terms of their political preference. Now, Recovery Central is not all about this kind of critical analysis. We're more interested in dialogue and people feeling invited to a dialogue. We're not insisting on eliminating all emotion from public discourse so much as to invite serious consideration of our substance use crisis. Is there something for us to do with the knowledge that misuse of mood-altering chemicals is actually costing our nation more than $820 billion a year? That means healthcare costs, business costs, courts, law enforcement, schools, families, and other costs. Almost $1 trillion a year because of the substance misuse. Is it also true that 98% of what our nation has been spending on the drug and alcohol use problem is only to clean up the mess created by the drugs and alcohol, leaving only 2% to spend on prevention and treatment. What exactly are the opportunities we have at the grassroots level? Is it to wait for the government to fix it? Are we to volunteer to pay higher taxes so the government can fix it? Or do we really have more freedom than that? And I'm still thinking of these words in the Serenity Prayer that I have mentioned before. The words written by Reinhold Niebuhr, who says, taking this world, this sinful world, as Jesus did, as it is, and not as I would have it. We have a lot of information today that presents this world in terms that the world is not. And so how might we also take this sinful world as Jesus does, as the world really is, as it truly is, and face that reality for all that it means and respond as Christ would have us to respond? We're talking about sobriety, the kind of sobriety that means we are spiritually wide awake. And we are about this business of responding to this world in the true Spirit of Christ. What does the true Spirit of Christ mean today for this substance use crisis that we're all facing? And if we can be wide awake, as God has called us to be, wide awake spiritually, we need to know that we can make a difference. We can do something even here, even in these days since the COVID-19 crisis, that we can do something to make a difference, and we can help others to become truly sober. I will also add an encouragement that you, in the sense of understanding the seriousness, taking the substance use crisis seriously, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and simply look up Chris Christie makes an emotional appeal for substance use. Words like that, an emotional appeal for substance use. Chris Christie, this was made back in 2016 or 2015. It doesn't represent my political views, actually. It's just a short 6.5-minute video that really does take the substance use crisis seriously. And hopefully, if you watch that, hopefully we'll have more discussion about all of this, and hopefully we'll see the practical value of this message. Thank you very much.